Okay, welcome to today's discussion. It is the weekend after Thanksgiving, so I'm not expecting many people to show up. So we're just going to get started. And if people show up, great. If not, I'll just be talking to myself all day. Cool. Here's the battle plan. We'll start with an emergency procedure. We'll get into the ILS, or an instrument landing system. We'll talk a little bit about weather if we have time. Then, if there's anybody that shows up today, we'll do a Q&A. If not, I'll just roll out and we'll call it a day. So first, let's do our emergency procedure. I want you to get, this is kind of like a warm up, right? So I want you to think about what happens if you're on the takeoff roll and all of a sudden you lose an engine. Well, first of all, let's back up a little bit and talk about our departure brief. We should always be briefing the departure before we depart so that we have the plan in the back of our mind, what we're going to do if we lose our engine. Now, there are a couple of different situations. If we are on the takeoff roll and we advance the throttle and we get a little bit of power, and then all of a sudden the engine dies. Well, that's too easy. Pull the power back, hit the brakes, taxi off the runway, and figure out what's going on. If we have just gotten off the runway, we are airborne, but we haven't cleared it yet. We could theoretically just set it back down on the runway and then apply some braking and then taxi off the runway again. If we are airborne and we are out of runway and we are below 1,000 feet, the best thing to do is probably just land straight ahead, find a road. Don't overthink it. Just pitch for your best glide and then set it down. And then finally, if you are at altitude, I want you to remember the A, B, C's of an engine failure, and that's A for airspeed. Pitch for your best glide speed. B is your best place to land. Find a good place to land, and C is checklist. Break out that checklist and work the problem. And then, of course, there's D and E, which is declare an emergency and execute a forced landing. And so that is our discussion on emergency procedures. I hope you did all right. Let's move on. Now we're talking today about the ILS, or the instrument landing system. Yeah. We'll be just talking about the precision approach. And again, this is in preparation for my CFII. I am a ground instrument, so this does count as far as your ground training goes. Okay, so what does a precision approach do? Precision approach provides lateral and vertical guidance to the runway in instrument conditions. So if you cannot see outside the window, this will get you down to the ground safely. They are lower minimums than a non-precision approach. So by definition, a precision approach will get you closer to the runway than a non-precision approach. A non-precision approach, again, by definition, is not quite as precise as a precision approach. They are expensive as a system, so they're often only used at larger airports. Brent, how's it going? Good to see you, man. I don't know if you can hear me. No worries. I'll just keep going. If you can hear me, great. If not, shoot me a text and we'll work the problem.
I'm here, sorry.
Awesome, cool, sounds good. Now, why do we care about precision approaches? They are used throughout the IFR system, and this is how we approach to land under instrument conditions. Sorry, Brent, do you mind muting yourself? I'm hearing myself feeding back. Thanks, man, I appreciate it. Cool. All right, so this is what we're going to cover. We'll talk about what is a precision approach, where to get your approach charts, the approach categories, choosing the appropriate approach and chart, and flying it, and then some cold weather corrections. If you have questions, just feel free to ask. So what is a precision approach? Like we said before, a precision approach gets you down from instrument conditions down to the runway. And a precision approach provides course and glide path information that meets the ICAO Annex 10 standards. Again, it's more precise than a non-precision approach. Pretty straightforward. Some examples are a precision approach radar, I believe it is, ILS and GLS. Now, non-precision approaches, by definition, are not quite as precise. But some might have approach with vertical guidance. So typically a non-precision approach won't give you vertical guidance, but some might. And let's talk about the DA versus DH versus MDA. The DA is the altitude where a decision is made to continue or execute a missed approach. That's the decision altitude. Decision height is the height where a decision is made to continue or execute the missed approach. Honestly, these three are kind of confusing. I just remember that DA is typically associated with precision approaches and the MDA is typically associated with non-precision approaches. And it's the lowest altitude where the descent is authorized. So you can come down and then stay at that altitude until you decide to land, whereas a DA, or the decision altitude, intersects at a specific altitude on the glide slope. And at this point, this is where you make your decision to land or go missed. Now let's talk about approach categories. The approach plate is grouped into different categories based on the aircraft's landing speed. Yeah. Sorry, real quick. Okay, good. Based on the aircraft's landing speed. And so category A, which is typically what we are, small aircraft, we're going to be category A, less than 91 knots. So if we're coming to land at less than 91 knots, that's category A. B is 91 to 120. C is 121 to 140, 141 to 165 for D, and then E is 166 knots or more. And you just remember that you can't go down in a category. Typically, the categories will give you your altitudes or your
Painfield, Snohomish County information Yankee.
So a slower
0-100 Zulu weather.
Might make
wind
a
calm,
lower
visibility 3.
faster error.
Sky conditions 3,100 overcast.
Now, how do we approach, or how do we select our approach and the chart? Well, first of all, like a VFR approach, we want to listen to the weather and determine what runway we're going to be landing. Obviously, if we are landing 3-4, we don't typically want to land, or we don't want to select an approach for runway 16. I mean, you might be able to get away with it, but in general, you want to select an approach that's going to get you to the preferred runway or the active runway in use. You also want to consider your aircraft capabilities. Will you be able to fly this approach safely? The weather. Will this approach get me down below the weather, and will it be legal? Will I be executing a straight-in landing, or will I need to do a circling approach? And do I want to do that today, right? And then personal preference. If you prefer an ILS over a, say, an RNAV approach, then, that could come into it. And of course, you want to verify that it is correct and current. We'll talk about that in a bit. Now, let's talk about the basics. Now, in general, you want to be aware of where you are in the National Airspace System. So always try to stay ahead of the aircraft. Where am I? What am I going to be doing next? Stay ahead of the plane. And then you want to establish, trim, cross-check, and adjust. And remember the 5 T's. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Typically, you want to keep your rate of descent around 500 feet per minute. Anything greater than 1,000 is not considered a stabilized approach, and you should go missed and then get reset and try again. If you go down to the decision altitude and you do not see the runway, you don't have the runway environment in sight, just go missed approach, and then we'll figure out how to get back down on the ground. Don't try to force the landing. And then, of course, with radio communications, even in VFR conditions, clarify if you're not sure about a clearance. And if ATC tells you to do something that you think is unsafe, you always have that magic phrase or magic word, unable. That is a full sentence, and I love that. Okay. Now, this is fine. Yeah, so let's talk about setting up for the approach. There's the FIMS acronym, kind of a hard one to remember, but you want to remember your fixes, your frequencies, the inbound course. This is for briefing the approach, by the way. So identify the fixes, the frequencies, the inbound course, identify marker beacons, minimums, the missed approach, and security. If you're using an ILS or a VOR approach, you're going to want to tune to that frequency, just like we're doing a VOR tracking. Like if we're tracking a VOR, you want to tune to it, identify it, verify it's active, and make sure you're on the right course. Same thing for an ILS. Basically, an ILS is a high-speed, low-drag VOR. And then you want to get your brief set up and note any important information. Now, this is the one that I was going to say. Not my favorite acronym in the world, LB GUMPS. I prefer GUMPS, much more simple: gas, undercarriage mix, prop, seatbelts. But they do have a more robust version of it, where it's landing light, boost pump, brake off, gas, undercarriage mix, prop, flaps, and security. So if you like this acronym, you can absolutely use it. Not my favorite, to be honest. You also have the 5 T's. When you arrive at any fix under instant conditions, you want to turn, time, twist, throttle, and talk. That means that you are turning to your heading. Note the time of your arrival and your expected arrival for your next fix. Turn and then twist to the next heading. Set your throttle and then communicate. Remember, in aviation, it's always aviate, navigate, communicate. Fly the plane first, figure out where you are, and then talk to ATC. Now let's talk about the inside and outer markers and the final approach fix. On the approach plane, I don't think I have one on here. Does this one have? It doesn't. There are inner and outer markers that give you your range or your position relative to the runway. If this is the runway, it will give you basically your position on the glide slope relative to the runway. That's what the inside and outer markers will tell you. And then you can also use them as your markers to do certain things like set your mixture, set your propeller. If you've got a variable pitch propeller, get your landing gear down, and then check the lights as you're approaching. Remember, 4 whites, you'll fly all night. You're going to want a balanced 2 whites and 2 reds like this. And that's what you're looking for when you break out of the clouds. Go back to my white here. Cool. Let's talk about the procedure turn. I think I've got it here. And we might cover it in a bit. Yeah. Okay, let's actually just talk about the ILS and bypass that stuff for now. An instrument approach. Let's back it up. In the instrument world, you can't really see outside, and I mean that's the whole point, right? Flying when you cannot look outside the aircraft. On the ground, we have our airport diagram. That is the chart that gets us from our hangar to the runway, or from the runway back to the hangar, or to the fuel point. And then in the instrument world, because we assume we cannot see outside, we have a departure procedure that gets us out of the airport into the en route area, or the en route system. And then we have our low en route charts, and those are our charts. Like if we're looking at like our regular charts in VFR, those would be the analogous to the low en route charts. They get us from our broad area, and then we have our stars, or our standard terminal arrival routes. That's the next chart that gets you into the airport environment to get you set up for your approach. And the approach plate is how you land and how you go around, or if you need to go mist. That is what the approach plate is there for. So it goes airport diagram, departure procedure, en route charts, arrival charts, and then finally the approach chart. And the approach chart again gets you set up to land, and then gives you a specific altitude that you can break out of the clouds. And if you can see the runway, great. If not, it also tells you how to go around. And this is how we typically look at our approach chart. First, we want to identify it. This is the ILS Yankee at Payne Field, and we want to verify that it is current, 2 November to 30 November. So it is good for another 4 days. Great. Up here is the localizer frequency, kind of like a VOR. This is what's going to give you your vertical and lateral guidance. This is the approach course. If you're trying to land on this runway and you're not on relatively close to a heading of 163, you're doing something wrong. You have 9,000 feet of runway to land. It's at 570 feet, and the airport elevation is 608 feet. There are non-standard takeoff and non-standard alternate minimums. Here are some special notes to keep an eye on. It says that circling runway 34 right is not authorized at night. You also need distance measuring equipment, and we've talked about that before. You must monitor DME from the Payne Field VOR, and simultaneous reception of the localizer and the DME is required. That means that you should be able to receive your guidance information that tells you you're on course and your distance information. Without both of those, you cannot shoot this approach. This tells you the information about what the weather is doing, what the lighting system is at the field. This is how you go mist, or how you go around. Remember that go around is a standard procedure. It's not an emergency procedure. So get comfortable doing it. Mist approach. We climb to a heading, we climb on heading to an altitude of 1,100 feet, then do a climbing right turn to 2,000 feet, heading on 280, and then intercept the Payne VOR on the 236 radial at 9 DME, or 9 miles away. That means we climb to 1,000 feet, or 1,100 feet, make a right turn to 280, and then intercept the 236 radial and track that for 9 miles, and then we execute a hold. This is where it is. We execute this hold there. Right? Now, going from left to right, we have our radio frequencies in the order that we might need them. We have our weather, Seattle approach, Payne Tower, ground control, clearance delivery, and the Unicom. And that's typically the order you're going to listen to them in. Approach, or you'll listen to the weather to make sure you're using the right approach. You'll tell Seattle Approach, hey, I've got the weather at Payne. They'll be like, great, talk to Tower. Tower will say, cool, you're clear to land. And then Tower will say, go talk to Ground, and Ground will tell you how to get home. And Ground will tell you to taxi back to the hang. And if you want to get out of the field again, you can contact clearance delivery and get out of the field. Now, we've got our top-down view of the approach plate. Anything that says IAF is an initial approach fix. And this is where you might start the approach from. So Penn Cove could be an initial approach fix, or Ewok could be an initial approach fix. We have some special use airspace here, an alert or restricted area. Anything that is in a box with a frequency, that's a VOR. This is the localizer, and this is the VOR here at Payne. This is what we'll be listening to land. Here's our holding pattern if they told us to hold, or if we need to come in from a weird angle, we can execute this maneuver to get established on the approach course. Again, here's an initial approach fix. Here's our distance from Payne. It's 11.2 miles from Payne. This is also 19.3 miles from Penn Cove. So we can identify this fix here multiple ways, either through the localizer and DME, or through the the VOR, and it tells us, what direction we're going to be landing in. We'll track this course to Payne. Our next waypoint is ITIPI at 4.4 DME. It says we are 4.4 miles away from Payne. And then here is a feeder route. If we are starting the approach from Payne, instead of, trying to start it from Penn Cove or Ewok, we can go to Payne VOR and then track this at 3,000 feet to Ewok and then get set up for the approach. And then once we are ready to land, we can land, or we can go missed approach. And here's the missed approach course. Climbing to 1,100, make a right turn to the 236 radial, and then hold at 9 miles out. And here's a SEPO, and a SEPO is defined as the 236 radial from Payne at 9 miles out, or 9 DME. So once you hit 9 miles on the 236 radial, you're at a SEPO, and you can start a 1 minute turn, 1 minute out, 1 minute turn, 1 minute in to do your hold. Now let's take a look down here at our side view of what's going on. We start at 3,000 feet until we get to Ewok. Again, Ewok is 11.2 miles away from Payne on a 163 heading, or course, I guess. And then once you clear that waypoint, you are allowed to descend down to 2,000 feet. At 2,000 feet, 4.4 miles away from Payne on the ILS, this is the final approach fix. You cannot descend below 2,000 until you hit there. Once here, you can ride the glide slope down. And if you are in a category A aircraft like we are below 90 knots or 91 knots on our approach. We can descend down to 770 feet, and we can execute either a landing or go missed approach. And here are weather minimums for each category and each situation. If we're landing the ILS, 770 feet is our lowest altitude. If we're just using the localizer, we're not using the vertical guidance, we can only descend down to 940 feet. And if we're going circling, if we are shooting the approach to 1.6, breaking off, getting on the downwind, and then circling the land 3-4 left, then we can only descend down to 1,100 feet. And you have to have the runway in sight the entire time you do that. Okay, and then here's the top-down view of the airport and touchdown zone elevation and some other stuff. Cool. So that's our ILS. And again, how it relates to the entire system. It gets us to the runway or missed approach. Bam. That covers everything I wanted to cover. Is there anything that you wanted to share or any thoughts that you wanted to bring up? Oh, wait, I also wanted to bring up the weather side. It is, yeah, we still got like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
What's on your mind, man?
Can you hear me?
Negative context. Say again?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. Gotcha.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I also started with an emergency procedure. I wasn't sure if anybody was going to come because it's the, the break.
Holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I figured, might be a good time to talk about the weather. So I'll bring up 1-800 weather brief if you're up for it. Yeah. Okay, so one of my students was thinking about going to do a cross country today, but we looked at the weather and it was low IFR and below freezing temperatures. So if you have below freezing temperatures or freezing temperatures and visible moisture like fog, remember that you are at risk of structural icing. All right, so let's take a look at our surface analysis chart. Oh, that's not going to be fun. We'll do it this way.
Is this the same information that ForeFlight pulls from when you do a briefing ForeFlight?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so this is one of the ways you can get it through SkyVector, through ForeFlight, through Garmin Pilot, through 1-800 Weather Brief, Aviation Weather. Great ways to get your weather briefing. So looking at Washington, looks like we got a trough, a high pressure area or high pressure system all around us, a lot of high pressure. Out in the Midwest, there's a cold front coming down from the north and another cold front moving through Texas down to Louisiana into the Gulf of Mexico. And then you've got a warm front coming north from the Gulf of Mexico through Florida, it looks like. That's neat. Let's see what else we got. Weather depiction. Overcast over here. Again, we get that cold front. What are the freezing levels? Looks like, yeah, at the surface. And I was looking at it this morning. It was -1 degree Celsius at Payne this morning. So, yeah, very clearly freezing today. Keep that in mind. Stay away from any rain or snow or fog or clouds because you could develop structural icing. Let's take a look at the prog charts. These are prognostic charts. Again, prognostic charts are what we expect to happen later on. They're not what's currently happening. There's going to be we expect to see a trough on the West Coast, high pressure system to the northeast of us, warm front moving from west to east, and the cold front moving from northwest to southeast, it looks like, and a lot of precipitation out in the east. Interesting. Mm-hmm. And let's take a look at the low-level significant prognostic charts. Looks like freezing level at the surface. Yeah, by the way, if you're ever unsure about what you're seeing, there is a legend, and it's okay to use the legend. A green freezing level above mean sea level and ceiling 1,000 to 3,000 feet, or visibility that's between 3 to 5 miles. So, but that's in the eastern Washington, it looks like. And a bunch of spaghetti off to the east. Cool. Yeah. Anyways, overall, not a bad day, I think. If we look at the aviationweather.gov. Let's interpret this METAR here. On the 26th day of the month at 16:53 Zulu, winds are calm, 10 miles of visibility, skies are clear. Beautiful. Temperature 2, dew point 1. Very close dew point spread. Temperature dew point spread is likely to develop fog. Altimeter 3028 just tells us our altimeter setting and the remarks. And here's the TAF between the 1800 and 1800 on the 26th and 27th. Winds are 350 at 3, greater than 6 miles visibility. A few clouds at 25,000 feet. Honestly, not a bad day to fly. Looking outside. Oh, yeah. Looks beautiful. Maybe I'll go flying with my son today. Cool. Yeah, so just a brief discussion on weather. Anything else you wanted to bring up today before we call it a day? If not, no worries.
Sorry, my internet glitched out.
No worries. Yeah, that pretty much covers it. I just wanted to talk real quick about instrument approach procedures, do an emergency procedure, and then talk a little bit about the weather. Again, I recognize it's the Thanksgiving holiday weekend, so don't expect to see a lot of people here today. But thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. I'll talk to you sometime this week.
Sounds good. Thanks. Bye.
See you.